So bad idea number one is that what doesn't kill you makes you weaker. Now, I wrote a book. My first book is called The Happiness Hypothesis. I read the wisdom literature of East and West and everywhere I could find. I pulled out the psychological claims, and then I analyzed them. Are they true? And so every society that leaves us a wisdom literature has some insights about adversity. And it is often stated like this: what doesn't kill me makes me stronger. So that's the wisdom principle. It's the opposite of the great untruth. And here's why it's true. The most important word I can give you tonight is anti-fragile. If you understand this word, you'll understand everything else about the talk, and you'll understand why the common things we do on campus in the last few years are mostly backfiring, why they're often very badly considered. So the word comes from Nassim Taleb. He's the guy who wrote The Black Swan. And he observed that there are certain systems that need to be tested and challenged. So he's one of the few people who correctly predicted the financial collapse in 2008, because he could see that the financial system was fragile. It had never been properly tested. And so if anything goes wrong, it's all going down. And he was right. So afterwards, he's thinking about this property of systems that get stronger when you test them and challenge them. And he says there's no word in English for this. He says we have the word fragile. So if something is fragile, then you have to protect it. So if you have a wine glass and you drop it, it will break, and nothing good happens from that. So we give our kids plastic cups, like sippy cups, because if they throw them on the ground, they don't break. Plastic is resilient. But does the sippy cup get better from being thrown on the ground? Does it age well? No, it doesn't do anything. It just doesn't deform. And so Taleb says we need more than that. It's not just resilience. We need a word for things that get better when you throw them on the floor. And so he coins this term anti-fragile, and here are the great examples. Our bones are anti-fragile. If you take it easy on them, if you lie in bed for months, they will get thinner and weaker. If you bang them around, they get stronger because that's the way bones are. They get stronger in proportion to the need. And the immune system is the best example, so let me go into that. Peanut allergies have tripled. They tripled between the 90s and about 2010. Why? They only went up in countries that tell pregnant women to avoid peanuts. So some immunologists got together to do a study in which they tested the hypothesis that if you expose infants to peanuts, it allows the immune system to actually develop. You have to shock it, expose it, challenge it, and then it gets stronger. So they recruited so there's an Israeli snack food called bamba, which is it's a puffed corn with peanut dust on it, and kids love it. So they recruited 640 women who had recently given birth and whose infants were at high risk of peanut allergy because there was some other immune issue. And here's what they did. They said, okay, half of you, standard advice, Mom, don't have any peanut products while you're lactating. You don't want to pass the peanut proteins into your child. Standard advice, keep your kid free of peanuts. And then at the age of 5, they tested everybody with a full immunological assay to see does their immune system respond to peanut proteins, to peanuts. And 17% of these kids had a peanut allergy, following the standard advice. They'll have to carry an EpiPen with them for life, and they have to always worry about food because it could kill them. The other half were given bamba and told, here, give your kid this snack food. And I should read the article carefully. I'm sure they monitored him. They didn't just say, go home and tell us if he survives. But, so they watched for signs. But what happened when they tested at age 5, here's what they found. 3%. Only 3%. So we could essentially eliminate peanut allergy in this country if we gave kids peanuts rather than running away from peanuts. So, as the authors say, our findings suggest that the standard advice was incorrect and may have contributed to the rise in peanut allergies. This is an example of our subtitle, How Good Intentions and Bad Ideas Are Setting Up a Generation for Failure. Okay, let's run the experiment again, only this time we'll use the whole kid. All right? Kids are fragile. Protect your children. You don't want them getting hurt. Nothing good can happen if your kid gets hurt, right? So you got to be there for them. You've always got to be there for them. because you don't ever want to let them go. What if they get hit by a car? You can't let the kid out. You have to be there for the kid. And if you do that, you have to always be there for the kid. I work in a business school, and only recently are we hearing from business people who say, I didn't hire this person, and his mother called me. So it never stops. It never stops. When you get on the helicopter parent, whatever, escalator, whatever it is, it never stops. And so here's the way to see how quickly this changed. I have a question for all of you in the audience. At what age were you let out? At what age could you walk out the front door, no adult with you, bye mom, I'm going to Billy's house. You walk 6 blocks, you and Billy go down to the store, buy some candy, or whatever. Maybe you don't want to, that's too dangerous. But the point is, at what age could you go out without any adult supervision? And so if it was first grade, you should say 6. If it wasn't until 11th grade, you should say 16. So please, everybody, think to yourself, what's your number? When were you let out without adult supervision? Not just walking to school, more than walking to school. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to call out your answer. But first, I only want people born before 1982. Raise your hand if you are born before 1982. Okay, so you're all Gen X and baby boomers and a couple of greatest generation. So, okay, so just you, only if you just raised your hand. I'm going to sweep my finger around the room, and when I point to your section, just yell it out loud. Okay, what's your number? Okay, so that's what I always find. 6 is always the mode. This is what we always did, always did. Kindergartners are a little young, but first grade, that's when kids go out. You go out and play, come back at dinner. There's other kids out there. That's what we always did, first grade. Okay? Many of you said 8. So between first to third grade. By third grade, everyone's out. Okay, now I'm going to skip the millennials. I'm sorry, but you're not interesting because you're just transitional. Okay? Now, just Gen Z, that is, and that's most of you students here. So this is what I always find, is that for the older people, that's what it is. Now, only if you were born in 1995 or later, raise your hand high. Okay, only you people, and only if you were raised in the United States. Other countries aren't as crazy as us. So only if you were born in 1995 or later and raised in the United States should you answer. Okay? What's your number? Okay. Where's your mom? Is she? Okay. So this is what I always find. All right? So the norm changed in the 90s. Beginning of the late 80s, the norm changed in the 90s. Just as the crime rate was ending, we had a huge crime wave from the 1960s to the 1990s. Just as crime was plummeting and it became safe to let kids out again, we changed our minds and said, oh, if I ever take my eyes off you, you will be abducted. Therefore, you cannot go out. You can go to soccer practice because I will drop you off and then another adult's responsible for you until I pick you up. But we will not let you out of adult sight until you are 12. That's the norm that we developed in this country in the 1990s. So many of us have idyllic memories of childhood, or at least we see stories about it. And in the 90s, we said, no more of this, no more of this. And what's the result? So Peter Gray is an amazing psychologist at Boston College who has done research on the effects of play. We learn so much in play. All mammals play. There is a biological imperative for mammals to play. In play, we learn how to coordinate, how to be empathetic, how to make up rules, how to enforce rules, how to be flexible with rules. What do you do when you don't get your way? We learn almost all of our social skills in play. It's the richest source of learning for children. We learn how to climb trees by climbing trees, not by taking a class on tree climbing where they show you PowerPoints. And so what's the effect if we suddenly take play away from children? And we say no more unsupervised play. Everything is done by adults. What's the effect? The effect is a big rise in psychopathology. One of the main things we learn in play is how to handle risk for ourselves. If you've noticed, what kids do is when they play with something, like if they get a skateboard or anything, they play with it, and once they master it, they ramp it up, they make it harder. Once you can skateboard, you then skateboard down staircases, right? Kids are seeking out the level of risk that their brain needs to unfold. We have to learn to face risk in order to become self-governing adults. And in the 90s, we said, no more of that. You just sit there on your, well, not on your device in the 90s, but you just sit there and don't go out where I can't see you. And so, as Alison Gopnik, a developmental psychologist, put it, trying to eliminate all such risks from children's lives might be dangerous. There may be a psychological analog to the hygiene hypothesis, which is like what I was telling you about with peanut allergies. In the same way, by shielding children from every possible risk, we may lead them to react with exaggerated fear to situations that aren't risky at all, such as a speaker coming to campus who's saying things that you hate. And we may isolate them from the adult skills that they will one day have to master. In other words, there is good reason to think that by protecting our children, we damaged them, we harmed them, we interfered with their development. So I'm not saying we need to go back to this, okay? This is too much because kids could actually die. And there's research on this. Death does not make you stronger. So that's too much. But this is just right. Because on this playground, you can get hurt. And that's very important. Because if you let kids face situations where they can get hurt, that's the only way they can learn how to not get hurt. Conversely, if you said, no, let's give kids playgrounds like this. This is what my kids were raised on. This is what most of you, right? Raise your hand if you recognize this from your childhood, right? This is boring. It's very hard to get hurt here, and therefore there's not much you can learn. It's fine for 3-year-olds, but not for 8-year-olds. The basic dictum, the basic insight that every culture knows, and it's common sense once you see it, is prepare the child for the road, not the road for the child. Because you can't fix every road that they will ever be on. They have to learn how to go off-road or on rough roads. In Britain, they're ahead of us on this. They have all the same problems, not quite as severely, but their heads of schools are beginning to understand the psychology here. Kids need risk. And so they're beginning to put construction materials out on a playground. And physics professors here, look what this kid is going to learn. He's created a lever, right? He's going to basically discover Archimedes for himself. And if the bricks go up like that, it's a lesson he will never forget unless he has amnesia. Okay. What do we do in America? The opposite. In America, we say, if anyone gets hurt, we will ban it for everyone, everywhere, for all time. And before we know it, everything is banned. I just found this meme floating around. We are all balloons filled with feelings in a world full of pins. Okay? This would be a terrible thing to teach teenagers or children of any sort. This, I think, is one of the reasons we end up with this. Taleb has this wonderful insight in his book. He says, he notes that a candle is easily blown out. A candle flame is fragile. If you have a candle flame, you have to protect it with a glass sleeve because any puff of wind will extinguish it. But once it reaches the stage of a roaring fire, the more wind, the better. The more wind, the stronger it gets. And so what Taleb says is, you want to be the fire and wish for the wind. If you get that, you understand anti-fragility.